Have you ever thought about what's in a name? I mean, think about your name. Who gave it to you? What was the meaning or importance of the name you were given? And what's been the impact of your name on you, your family of origin, and those around you? Thank you for tuning in once again to Your Time to Come Alive. My name is Valerie Hope, and I am your host. Every week, and in some cases more than each week, I have these fantastic conversations with interesting people that will help us become more conscious, more connected, and the outcome of all that is to be even more creative. I'm so happy when I meet someone that I think is worthy of sharing their story, their their progress, and today is no exception. I have this wonderful student. Well, I would say I almost feel like I was one of your mentors, Rooha, although it was a very short period of time.
You were.
Rooha Hagar. Rooha and I met, oh gosh, Rooha, it's been over a year and a half perhaps, I think, when we first really connected, because although I was a mentor with Eagle Scholars, I don't, because you were senior, we didn't really connect that often. But I remember when you reached out to me because Dr. Janet made you or recommended it to work on your speech for your scholarship. There's a scholarship you're applying for last year, and I really enjoyed our sessions. I think we talked maybe 3 times or something, and you had a really fantastic speech, and you got a second place. So yay, we did it. I'm gonna take a little bit of the pride with
The
that.
credit, you
No,
can.
not credit, because I asked you for 20%. I don't remember seeing the check. I haven't seen the receipts. So, but I do feel the same level of pride that I'm sure others in your family, in your life do, because not only was that a wonderful part of your experience in high school, but also you were valedictorian of your class at Conrad High. Whoop whoop.
Yes.
Now, here's where it gets interesting, Ruha, and one of the reasons that I wanted to invite you to chat today. Some of you may have heard of Rooha Hagar. Now, the reason you may have heard of her is because she was famously or infamously, you want to call it, depending on your position, uh, when you had your speech, your valedictorian speech, you were asked, well, I'll let you tell the story, but as a result of your speech, you actually had several interviews on local media and national media because of your speech. So I want you, let's just start there. Tell us, what was it that happened that made you famous?
Well, really to the shortest version of it is that I, against my principal's will and wishes, I said the names of Trayvon Martin and Tammy Rice in my speech, which then prompted my principal to cut the mic off so I couldn't complete my speech or finish what else I had to say, which when I posted the video on Twitter, and I did not expect it to go as viral as it did, but yeah, I mean, it has, I think, 1 million, 1.8 million views now, a lot of likes, which then, yeah, news reporters reached out, and then it all just went from there. But yeah, that's what made me famous.
I mean, that's it. Just like 1.8 million views because I put it on Twitter. Okay, got it. No, that's fantastic. But that's not really the news. I think that the courage that you had, right? The guts that you had to actually say what you thought was important to be said. That's where I want to start. So talk to us about what was it that inspired you to write the speech that you did?
Okay. So when I found out I was valedictorian, I kept postponing writing my speech because I felt like I wanted it to be special and I couldn't really focus on what I wanted to say, and nothing would come to mind until I had a conversation with a friend of mine who works at a school, and he was basically telling me how many students in middle school he works, and he said many students end up dropping out by 8th grade, so they don't make it to high school even, for different reasons. Maybe there aren't enough resources to support them. They feel like they're not good enough for school, or they just have to support their families financially, and they basically don't get to graduate because they're, something blocking their way. And that got me thinking that even though we worked hard enough to get to where we were, there were many things that allowed us to get there. And one of it is I did not have to drop out to, help my family financially, but also I was alive to make it to graduation. And that kind of got me thinking about groups of students who did not make it to graduation. And that's kind of how I started writing my speech, which, other than saying the names of Trayvon Martin and Tamir Rice and other Black children who were killed um, as a result of police brutality and other types of brutality, I also added about kids who died in school shootings, and students in Iran who can't go to college or continue their education. They're limited in that. So the whole section was meant to be dedicated to those who didn't basically end up graduating from high school, even though we did. And it was meant to be inspirational. Like the end, I say, even though like we're graduating now, there's still a lot of work to be done, and you guys can kind of reflect on that. So that's how I ended up writing that section of the speech.
What was it specifically that touched you or moved you after that conversation with your friend about those students not being able to complete or go on in their education? Well, why was that so important to you?
I guess just part of me believed, like before that conversation, just really believed that I got here because I worked super hard. And, I'm a valedictorian because, I'm smart and I, worked hard. I turned in my assignments on time. And after that conversation, I realized there is a lot more that happened that allowed me to be here, to be a valedictorian. I did not have to, again, work. I mean, I worked during high school, but I did not have to support my family financially. I always felt supported by the teachers, and the learning environment was well adjusted for me and my learning the way I like to learn. I never was targeted because of my race. I never had to, I never experienced, any, basically, yeah, there were a lot of other things that allowed me to be a valedictorian and get there. It wasn't just me working hard, though, that's a nice sentiment. Like, it's only you, just if you work hard, you can achieve it. But yeah, I mean, it almost felt, after that conversation, it felt like a privilege to graduate. Like, it didn't feel like, I had earned it really. Yeah, so. Yeah.
That's really profound that you said it's a privilege to graduate. And I would add to that, it's not a right, right? It sounds, although ironically, I do think that education is a right, right? It's a birthright of
Mm-hmm.
everyone that is in this country, especially all over the world. Really is one of the main, as an access to freedom, as an access to wealth, as an access to self-actualization. I mean, there's so much that's tied into education. So let's talk about that. What clearly you had to work hard to become valedictorian. There's no doubt about that. But what is it about you and education that made you and fueled you to focus and work as hard or dedicate what you needed to dedicate in order to be successful?
I think a big part of it is coming to the United States to be educated, to go to college, and all of that. I mean, I knew from the moment we not even stepped foot in the US, the moment we left Iran and went to Turkey, I knew then that even if I did not want to go to college, I had to suck it up and go anyway, because my parents have sacrificed so much for us to have a life here. But I mean, throughout my middle school and high school education, I did develop a love for education and do enjoy going to college to a certain extent. But it was never an option not to go. And I valued education because a lot of Baha'is in Iran, just like the I would have faced if I had stayed, they can't go to college. And I have a lot of relatives who have either tried, applied to public Iranian universities, have gotten in, but then a month after they were expelled for you know they found out that they were Baha'is. And yeah, I mean, I've had relatives go to prison for teaching in Iran, and so just knowing
Because
all
they
of
were
that.
Baha'i? because of the faith.
Yeah, because
Okay.
yeah, because there were Baha'is and teaching. They were teaching more of underground classes for other Baha'i students,
Okay.
and the classes do get, the guards do find out where they are, and yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, just knowing all of that, I think it helped a lot, quite a lot actually, to push me because imagine I came to the U.S. in 2012, like end of sixth grade. I didn't know any English,
Mm.
and really, yeah, it took a lot of like pushing on my part, I guess, too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal. I'm also an immigrant, so I totally get that. I came to the U.S. when I was 9. My
Oh,
family immigrated from Panama, from the Republic of Panama.
oh.
So Spanish is my first language. I learned English then, but it's not unusual for those of us in the immigrant community, at least in my experience, and you can tell me if this has been your experience or not. Education is like the key to everything,
Hmm.
and I knew that our family, my family, my parents specifically wanted the best for us. I remember actually before I graduated from high school, I was just going to go to like a local junior college. First of all, because I
Hmm.
couldn't really figure out what I wanted to study, and a few of my close friends were going to a junior college, so I thought, yay, we'll continue to party, we'll hang out. And my dad was like, no, under no circumstances. You will go to a 4-year school. Oh man, I was so mad. I could not. I'm like, why? It's a waste of money. I don't even know
Right.
I want to study yet. I I'm sure I didn't say that because I was always scared of my dad, but in my head I did. And I ended up going to the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa for 4 years and now have a degree in public relations and Spanish. But to your point, education has been so revered in the at least in the immigrant community that I connected with,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
beyond high school and college, and in some cases, when you're talking master's, PhD level, and even then, never-ending education.
Hmm.
So although I haven't pursued a master's or PhD, I've always found that education has always been the place where when I need to level up and expand, I'm taking a course. I've signed up for some experience, get mentoring. So let's talk about now your experience in college. So now you just completed your freshman year. Tell us about that. Where'd you go to school and what are you, if you know what you're studying, or
I
at
do
least for now,
actually.
that might change.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So yeah, I'm actually studying international relations and global studies, which is a really long name, at UT Austin, University of Texas at Austin. It first year was pretty decent. I mean, I think everybody goes into college having like these big expectations, and I mean, UT kind of met most of mine. The campus is beautiful. It's really big. It's close to the city. There's a lot to do there all the time. Um, yeah, the professors have been super nice, super cool. I was scared to go to office hours at first, I think, because I didn't have any questions. But then, I talked to a friend. They were like, "Just go anyways. Like the professors don't know your name and your face unless you go and talk to them." So I had to, yeah, just force myself to go to office hours.
And how was it? Did you go and whose office hours did you go to?
So there was a professor I really wanted to go to his office hours, but I never built up the courage to go to that one. The one I did go to is was my literature professor.
Okay.
I wanted to like suggest her some books, um, so I had to just make up an excuse to go to her office hours. But then once I got there, she started asking about me and like where I was born, and I forgot to even mention the books. So
You
it was
wanted
kind
to
of pointless.
recommend books to her?
Yeah,
About
like
what? Like what book?
Iranian
Oh,
authors. She seemed like I mean, we read a lot of different authors in her
okay.
class from all over the world, and I was like, maybe she'd be interested in some Iranian authors. But yeah, I totally forgot. I sent her an email after, but she didn't, I guess, read it. Professors are so busy in college. They even if they make time for you, you should be like grateful, even though it's their job. But
Well, good
yeah.
for you. Yes, I don't know if I did office hours my first year, but I can definitely see how it's intimidating, like especially if you're in a huge class, 300 students, and like, what do I have to do in there?
Right.
And then the one that you didn't go to, what kept you from going?
Um, I don't know. It was a smaller class, and the class was called Blackness and Mass Incarceration. And
Blackness and
he
mass incarceration.
concentration,
Oh
yeah.
wow.
I took it first semester, and he was like, just he's so knowledgeable about everything. Like, the things he would like have us write down as notes that like we would have to later like talk about in our essays were just like I don't like I've kind of tried to research some things on my own, and watch documentaries and try to keep up. But really, his class was really eye opening, and I guess what I wanted to to tell him during office hours was just thank you, but I didn't have any specific questions, and he just, um, I don't know what kept me from going, really. Maybe I should think about that. But I think I was just, and it was still a little intimidating because I wasn't talking in class either, and having going there and him asking like, why don't you share in class, or like why you should like talk more, like that would, yeah, I don't know.
So what was it like in that class that had you stay quiet? What happened? What was going on?
Well, I've recently realized that prefer to listen. I don't like talking a lot, even in like my friend groups, or just I just prefer to listen and like absorb as much of the things as I can. But I think I don't I don't know. I guess I didn't want to like say something wrong, or like say something and then other people don't feel comfortable sharing. Like, I don't want to overpower anybody, or I don't
Really
know.
overpower anybody? I have a feeling if you're already this self-conscious about even speaking up, that overpowering is probably on the other side of that.
Right. I don't
What would you
know.
have said? So let's pretend, you obviously that seems like a pretty hardcore class. There's probably some things that came up that were either really impactful or interesting to you. So what are some things that you would have wanted to say or share?
Um, I can't like there were like obviously different specific topics that we talked about specific things, and each chapter. But I think just like maybe after we watched documentaries, I would want to like share some of my reflections, or after we did a reading, we read like 3 chapters of Asada Shakur's autobiography, and it was really interesting to me how like not only her being black, but her being a black woman, like how that had shaped her story. And maybe I had some comments around there. He would ask questions, and have students answer, so I can't really think of any questions. But all of the readings we did, I have a folder now of like all of the printed readings I have, and I'm probably going to keep them forever. And since the with the recent events that have been happening, I tried to share most of them on my Instagram story, and some of the ones that aren't available online, I was like, if you guys want, you can DM me, and I'll send pictures of the readings, just because they were all so interesting. um, yeah.
Which ones tended to really call your attention? What were the ones the topics or certain elements that drew you in?
I think the biggest one, and I mean, I should have put two and two together like before I took this class, but uh, really like how blackness has been criminalized, like how crime has been associated with blackness, and how that has happened throughout the years, with the laws that have been passed. And I think I watched the documentary 13th when I was a sophomore in high school, and then I like wrote a really terrible paper, but nonetheless a paper on some of the topics from that, like on the prison industrial complex and some of those things. But I guess I never sat down and another topic that I interacted with for the first time in that class was just the idea of race. Like, what is race? And I realized you can't really define race as a concept. Its implications are real, of course,
Hmm.
for people, but race as a concept, as a way that we organize society, it's just kind of made up. And we were talking about like where or when in American history did race suddenly become like an important thing, like a way people started organizing themselves and thinking about themselves and others. And it really was it came out of the institution of slavery. And because prior to white servants receiving like more rights and more privileges, the white servants and the enslaved blacks were, thinking of themselves as equals and interacting as equals, rising up against the people, you know, together. And there was really no concept of race until, it was created by humans. And so that was really like mind blowing, because if you are taught that it is some made up thing, you can see a future where it doesn't hold, that much significance in the way we interact with each other, in the way we organize ourselves. So I think that was really profound for me. That was like, wait, like I've lived my entire life, or not my entire life, like since coming to the US, I've interacted with race, like, oh, this person is black, like this person is white. So you're telling me like there is no specific, like there's no way to define it, and like it doesn't like matter as much, like it's just the implications that are real. But yeah, anyways, I'm rambling, but it was really interesting.
It's really interesting. You're right. So race is a made-up concept made by humans, right, to categorize and create a caste system, if you will, for other humans. And I did a podcast yesterday, which I'll send you or tag you on it so you can watch it, with Dr. Anthony Young, who is a psychologist, and he's also the president of the Black Psychologists Association in Colorado Springs and Denver. And he talks tons of resources. So he mentioned books and documentaries that I think you'll really get into. But I want to go back to something you said. Since you came to the U.S., really your time interacting with what you now know as race, but it's not really race, but the implications of race. What was it like before? So prior to you coming to the U.S., what was in your mind? What kind of education or exposure had you received in Iran?
So in Iran, I really only, saw other Iranians. Iran is not as racially diverse of a country as the United States, I want to say. We have some, actually, I've recently learned we have some black Iranians who live in the south of Iran, which is interesting, but we never, like, we're kind of in the south, but I never interacted with them. We have different ethnicities, mostly the Kurds, the Afghans, the Tajiks, but we don't really have, different racial groups, and they don't like define a lot of things in Iran. But interestingly, through my Baha'i education, which I go, when you're young, you go to Baha'i children classes, and you kind of learn, simple topics like truthfulness, love, and, all of, the things you want to instill in children at a very young age. But there was a topic like about unity. We talked a lot about unity, and love and unity go hand in hand. But then we had a tree. We had to like make a craft tree, and then put the faces of 4 people on it. Like it was an exercise for all of us to do. And we had to put white face, black face, yellow and red, just to say like all of us are the branches of one tree, and the leaves of one branch. Like we're all the same people. And I was like I've never seen. I guess like I was supposed to be white. I just hadn't like thought, oh, there are people different than me. But
How old were
that's
you?
because I was children class like 5, 4, 5, 6, yeah, just at the very young age. I don't remember how old I was when we did that exercise, but
So
really
something
like a lot of.
primary,
Mhm.
elementary school, and that was the first time that you realized that there were categorizations for different colors
Or yeah, that it
in race.
existed. Yeah.
That's fascinating. And so how did that impact you and how you saw yourself in relation to others?
I think, I mean, like, I learned about race alongside unity, and we're all the same. So I was just like, oh, cool. Like, there are people different than me, but, again, united, we're all the same. We're all on the same tree. So it did not, like, make that big of an impact on me. I was just like, I was like, cool, I guess this is a thing that exists. When I came to the US, um, I, but I mean, like in Iran, obviously we see like media, and we have like, my parents were Michael Jackson fans, and we like watch. I mean, I listen to Britney Spears and some other artists that I don't know, but um, so I don't think it was like a really foreign topic when we came to the U.S., because I had consumed enough media, and had these things about America that I thought were true, and the life in America, how it would be, because I've watched a lot of movies in Turkey. But yeah, when I came here, it wasn't a foreign topic, but I remember the first time I interacted with it was at a very young age, yeah.
That's interesting. And so then you move here, and what was your experience here? Like what did you see or notice, or how did you interact that made a difference, you think?
So we were lucky to be resettled in a really diverse neighborhood in Dallas, and it's called Rickery Meadow, and it's being gentrified right now as we speak. Yeah, but yeah, we were resettled there because rent was cheap and everything is close. And the organization that resettled us, the office was really close, so we could walk there, get supplies and sign papers and whatever we needed to do, get vaccinated and. Um, but yeah, I really at first, like my friend in Oregon, she was came to the U.S. like 6 months before us. She would say, "Oh, I'm the only immigrant in my school, and everybody looks at me weird, and I feel really uncomfortable." She would tell me she would come home crying, and um, I was like, that has not been my experience at all. Like I go to school and I speak broken English, and then my friends speak broken English back to me. Like it's yeah. I was like, I'm having a great time, and the teachers had taught enough immigrant students to know to be patient, and yeah, it was. I had a totally different experience than my friend who moved to Oregon first. Um, but yeah, I had friends of different backgrounds, and I realized that when coming to the U.S., I realized my immigration story is not like that unique. It's not that special. But also, like people have left their countries for far worse things, and some had to flee without like being able to sell their stuff first and plan their trip. Like we were able to do all of that. So it was just an eye-opening thing, and um, I'm really grateful for being resettled in Victory Meadow, for sure. Yeah.
That's really fascinating. The fact that you were surrounded by other immigrants, therefore the experience. It was easy to share that experience. You weren't an outcast or an outsider coming in, at least not by the majority standards. Talk to us a little bit about what brought your family here. Like, what was the impetus for you all to leave everything in Iran and come here?
So as I mentioned, I was born into a Baha'i family, and Iran is, not to get like all technical, but Iran is the Islamic Republic of Iran. So basically, the government rules based on what they think is Islam, which is really not. But
We hear your
so
opinion, what they think.
yeah, I
Okay.
mean yeah, I have so much respect for the religion of Islam, even though people think you had to leave because of Islam. No, I had to leave because of the government of Iran and their interpretation of the religion. But anyways, yeah,
I get that.
I so we were persecuted in Iran for our religion.
What
It
does
has
that mean?
happened.
Like, tell us what exactly did that look like for you and your family?
So when I was born, and the things I remember are not as big of a persecution as like closer to the revolution of 1979. So I can just kind of like tell you both of them.
Mm-hmm.
So closer to the revolution, there were a lot of Baha'is who went missing. A lot of them were imprisoned. I remember I was recently, like 2 months ago, reading a book about Mona Mahmoud Nejad. She was 17 years old when she was arrested and hung, like amongst other like 8 other women, Baha'i women. She was 17 years old, and I remember seeing her picture like growing up on our, um, um, in our house. But I had never like read her story with that much detail. But then I came to the U.S. and read it in English, which is interesting. Um, but yeah, so it was, there were a lot of violent arrests and killings. My mom. So since then, Baha'is have not been able to go to university. There's like on the application, there's a box that says like, what is your religion? And for a while, the Baha'i community was advised not to lie on the application, and so they were just not accepted. I think for like a few months or maybe a year, they were advised to maybe like say or leave it blank, or say you're Muslim, because at the end of the day, we believe in all religions. Um, and then, after they would get in, and then the university would find out, and then they would get expelled. So really, there's no way for Baha'i to get an official education in Iran. Um, but there is an underground university called BIHE, or the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education.
You're not giving
So
it away,
that
are you?
no,
I mean, if it's
no.
underground, Rooha.
No, I mean, they know there have been a lot of arrests, and that's my family was teaching for that underground university when they got arrested. My mom actually, I think before it was an official university, my mom attended a few like classes in their beginning stage. But my mom should have a college degree. Like I every time I think about like how much she was robbed of, just because of her religion. My mom knows
Mm.
so much about psychology, about history, about religion. Like she just quotes. Like when I have a question, about religion, and I ask her, um, about Islam, about the Baha'i faith, about Christianity. She's been researching and reading. She should have at least one degree because she should be a teacher right now. But she
Mm.
doesn't. She works at Walmart, and um, I so many of stories similar to this are in Iran and in the diaspora. You can ask Baha'i Iranians, and they would tell you. But so my parents, they none of them received a college education, and then we were born. In school, they would tell us things like, "Oh, you can't play your violin for this celebration because you're a Baha'i. We don't want to spotlight you." Or they would tell my brother, "Oh, don't touch other kids." It's like a thing that in Iran, the government is trying to like say Baha'is are dirty and nasty. So Baha'is can't even work in the food industry. This is,
Wow.
yeah, it's a lot of like random things. But my parents were like, if there's no future for our children here, and just one summer they were like, guys, let's sit down and let's think about it. Um, and yeah, we decided to leave. Then, I mean, when we were leaving, some government officials were looking for my mom to arrest her because she was volunteering for a clinic. But I think even beyond that, like she would have stayed if that was the extent of the persecution. But they really wanted us to get an education, so
Wow.
that's what
What,
prompted
what
it.
an amazing sacrifice to have
Yeah.
made. Was there a distinction between access for men or women in education? Or Baha'i was like the cutoff, and then beyond that, didn't really matter?
Yeah, it was Baha'i was the cutoff. Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Yeah.
And Ruha, so now here in the U.S., you obviously have, I guess you and your siblings are all successful in your school endeavors, right?
Yes.
I know Nora. I know she graduated this year, so she's good at. Are they going to the same school? Is she going to the same school as you?
No, I tried to force her. I tried really hard, but no, she's going to
Oh,
UNT.
okay, all right. Well, why force? Why force her?
I wanted to room with her because I would feel
Oh,
so much more comfortable. Yeah,
she's like, I
but
need to
that's
be
selfish.
free.
She does.
Good for her. You're an amazing sister, I'm sure. I have an older brother. He was 2 years ahead, and I ended up going to the same university. But we're so different. First of all, we would have never have roomed together, and
Yeah.
it worked for us. But because we were so different, I can imagine sisters have a little different relation.
Yeah.
So you're gonna be grateful in the long run.
Maybe. Maybe.
What's been the most challenging thing for you once you came to the U.S. and you started, you started to live the dream that your parents had for you and your siblings of going for that education? What's been the biggest challenge?
Mm, I mean, there have been a lot. I'm just like trying to think of the biggest one. I
There's
want to
so many
say,
challenges. Feel free to
um,
list them if you have more than one.
okay, I mean, the language was at first, a problem just because I needed to know more than just like school English. I needed to know like tax English so I could translate for my parents, and hospital English so I could, translate again, like make phone calls. So I had to like speed up that learning, and a lot of it really came from movies and YouTube. So after a year or a year and a half, I was, fine speaking English, enough English at least to get by. I think adjusting um, like just adapting to America, or to like the way Americans do things, or the way Americans like talk, and just culturally. Um, there was, I mean, the food obviously was different. We had to like find Persian stores to get a lot of the food we would usually eat in Iran. Um, but really, the biggest, and I still struggle with this. Um, um, I guess it's like understanding that this is a permanent state. This is not temporary.
What do you mean?
Um, just because, like, I don't know, for a year and a half in Turkey, our life was, in limbo. Where would we be settled? In Australia, in Canada, in the US. No, you can't have a pet because, we're gonna, we don't know when we're gonna leave. What are you gonna do with the pet? No, you can't, put pins in the wall because this is a rented apartment. Like, we don't have a house. Like, everything was temporary. Um, and, we came here, and then the problem of missing home started, and it's like I don't know what to do with it. But
For you?
I like to, for me, yeah, missing Iran. um, and trying to, like, in the back of my mind, I kind of want to believe that this is temporary, and then things will better in Iran, and get better, and I will be able to go back, and like the work I want to do, like for women's education, and like if I want to start a foundation, I can do all of that in Iran. Like, it'll be fine. Like, the future is great. But then part of me like also tells me this is permanent. Like, get used to this life, get like find really good friends here, and I guess it's just like just understanding like what my life is right now. I mean, I've been here for 7 years, so this is probably like permanent. But yeah,
You would
missing
say that
Iran for
even
sure.
in the midst of a pandemic, you would say this is permanent?
Not this situation per se, but me living in the US.
You living in the US, and the
Yeah.
possibility of going back to Iran. So what's the vision, or what's the dream
Of what?
when you think about this homesickness, or this desire to go home? What's the dream that you have in mind for yourself?
Like, what would I like the future to be?
Perhaps, yeah. Or
Yeah.
what have you imagined the future to be? So if this was not permanent, let's say this, if
Okay.
this were not a permanent state or a permanent place for you, what what would you like your life to look like? Where would you like your life to lead you?
Um, I would like to, and I think about this a lot, but I would like to start a foundation, but do it in Iran, and live in Iran, and better my Farsi again, because it's getting more and more like terrible as we speak. um, Actually connect back with my family, um, see all of my friends, but then also travel around the world. But my home base, and like where I live and where I do my work, would be Iran. And all the work. Not that I don't want to like do work in the U.S., and I don't want people to take it the wrong way, because there's a lot of debate, as refugees don't get to be ungrateful, and refugees have to just be happy with being accepted to the US, and try to find, or work towards the American dream, and whatever else they say. um
Yeah.
but yeah, that is what I would want.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, who knows? Our world and our lives take some twists and turns that are very unpredictable. So I hope that you get everything you wish for and more, or
Thank
better.
you.
Yes. I want to talk about what's been happening in this world now, right? So pandemic has been a big part of our lives over the last few months. Also, everything around the Black Lives Matter movement. You've clearly studied this in international relations and global studies, and your class around blackness and incarceration. So I'm curious about what's been your experience, or your opinion, or your take on life the last 4 months? What's been going on in your mind about it, or what have you experienced?
It's been 4 months.
Right, since March,
Oh God.
almost
Wow.
5.
Okay, that is a lot of time.
That's a lot of time.
I was gonna say I haven't really registered a lot of what has been happening. Like in March, we were told to, don't come back to the university. This is, forever. Classes are online, and I was like, okay. And then after that, like just things started happening, and I don't think I registered a lot of it. Um, but I guess part of, as far as the Black Lives Matter movement goes, and everything that has been happening around that, um, I'm I'm not I'm glad that the people are doing what they're doing, and they're saying what they've been wanting to say. They're yelling, and I'm not glad that it took George Floyd dying for all of this to happen. But it's no longer an issue that people can just forget about, because especially for and I've told you this before, but like for non-black people, for me, for example, I don't have to think about what it means to be black in America. I don't have to think about police brutality. I can honestly take off, or turn off my phone, don't watch the news, go about my day, and just think racism is not real, police brutality is not a thing. But then now, everywhere you go, you're kind of reminded of that. And, it's no longer an issue people can just ignore. And I'm really happy about that, because, when I think the same kind of, when my mic was cut off, um, kind of that was, they were trying to, keep people comfortable in the audience. This conversation around this topic is uncomfortable for a lot of people. And I guess part of what my principal was hoping to achieve is, you know, just everybody in the audience is happy this is graduation, and people are, should be comfortable, and, white people should not, feel like they're being called out. Though that was not going to happen. Anything was that like that was not going to happen. But now nobody gets to be comfortable. You get to hear about this, you get to read about it. If you're talking to your friend, they're probably going to talk about it. You might show up, you might be driving and you see a protest. So it's in everybody's face, and I'm glad it's about time for us to think about what a world without police brutality looks like. So yeah.
You mentioned liking some of the things that you're hearing and seeing. What are the things that you've heard or seen that have really felt good to you or felt just to you?
The biggest thing is how radical some of the things people are calling for are. Like, it's no longer like stop killing black people. It's literally like, do we need the institution of do we need the police? Do we, like, what purpose does it serve? And how can we better it, but not better it, but how can we replace it with something that actually works? And I mean, I'm not saying like I am for all of the solutions that everybody is talking about, but I am really glad that they're having all of these conversations about things that might seem so radical. But we can't really get anywhere without asking these questions. And one I think, like, reading Angela Davis, like going back to my class, I read like a few pages of Are Prisons Obsolete? And I was thinking, like, I have my entire life, prisons have existed, as some where bad people go. I've never sat down to think, what does a world without prisons look like? Can a society exist without prisons? Like, we don't ask these questions a lot. It doesn't mean that a world without prisons can exist, but like, why don't we question it? And yeah, I'm just glad radical conversations are being had, and we're kind of thinking everything through. It's no longer like reform. It's no, let's build something from ground up that will actually work. So
I know you just graduated you've completed your freshman year, so this might be a bigger question than one would think at this point in your life, but I'm going to ask anyway. When you think about what world you and your siblings, your family, or whatever future family you have would like to live in, if you were to make this permanent, let's say here in the US, what would you like to see as these radical questions are coming around? What what would be, you think, yeah, helpful? What would work in your eyes?
um, I think if like we're going like really really far, and like there's no limit to what I can
No
say
limits.
here.
No
Okay,
limits, Ruha.
I would like borders to not exist. So countries would not exist. It would just be one big united world.
Are you the
Um,
United World of the world?
yeah, I
I
I
like it.
think
Okay.
I think borders like create a lot of like us against them. Like, oh, they're coming to our space. I don't know. I would just like to see them go away.
Hmm.
Um, I would like to see a world without prisons. Again, I've thought about these things for a while, and I think there are a lot of different ways to rehabilitate or to educate people who might have done wrong. So a lot of restorative justice, justice that doesn't just make sense to the judge or to the police, justice that makes sense to the families who have been wronged, justice that will prevent the thing from happening again. Um, but yeah, just racial unity. I would like, for just equality of men and women to be actually real all over the world, especially in Iran, where, females are kind of second-class citizens. They're, you know, what they say in court doesn't count the same as what men say, and, a lot of different things. Yeah, I would like to see a lot of change, but we don't have time for me to go on. But um,
We got time. What is it? You can say whatever you want. I mean, those are some things you've mentioned, to be honest, I've never thought about. And I think that's one of the reasons, I feel like emotional right now all of a sudden. I think that's one of the reasons that I really wanted to talk to you is because you have, such a huge future ahead, you and those in your generation. And I think about, wow, when did I stop thinking that a world without borders would ever exist?
mhm.
I've never thought about that and just kind of hit me like, oh, snap. Have I stopped dreaming? Like, what am I working towards, And the world without prisons, I'm like, revolutionary, Rua. Like, yeah, what would that look like? I talk and I've mentioned, I'm like, yeah, it would be great to really help people that have mental health issues or really figure out what we can do in communities where there's high crime. Are there ways to support families and educate people so some of those things are like diminished significantly or eliminated altogether. But it's been interesting to think about, like, wow, at what point do all of us collectively as humans figure out how to make the world better without all the limitations? I feel like what you
Mhm.
pointed out, all those radical notions that you mentioned are like, that's like nirvana. That would be the most wonderful thing to do. Why wait? Right? Why do we give up so much and live so small and manage things so tightly? So that's what it's brought up for me. So yes, thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Phenomenal.
I think.
I don't know what I'm going to do with all that. Thank you for that. Because I just feel guilty. I'm like, oh man, I've stopped
No,
dreaming.
no, I
No,
think a
go ahead.
lot of it is like, us getting comfortable. And like for me, it took me reading somebody else, have these notions and these perspectives for me to question it. Because, for example, to talk about prisons, but I'm so far away from a prison. I don't drive by it. I don't, have any relatives now that are, in American prisons. And, um, or yeah, like in general, I don't have to interact with the prison industrial complex. And the farther away you are from things, the more comfortable you are. You think, just send the bad people away, and that's it. It doesn't affect me. But then you actually interact with what happens in there, and you read books about, do we actually need this system, or can we have a better one, um, one that actually helps and educates, and yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, there's so many things. I remember I used to be in an organization called Up with People. It's still around, but it's kind of shape shifted since I was in it. But part of it was we did community service. So we were a global group with students, all 18 to 25 from different parts of the world who traveled together. And in my case, I was a staff member, so I was with the organization for about 5 years. Literally lived out of a suitcase for 5 years, and traveled that space and time to about 17 countries. And I
Oh,
remember, yeah, we lived with host families in every single place. And actually, oh, I hear some feedback. Do you hear that? Is that me?
I don't hear it.
Okay. But I remember a few things that we did during those community service days. And one was in the Netherlands. We did go to a prison and interact with some of the inmates. Much different experience than what I imagine here, at least from what I
Right.
see on television. And then living with all these different host families over the course of the 5 years, I, in some occasions had an opportunity to live in non-traditional family, places. For example, in a homeless shelter in Ohio, stayed in a homeless shelter for a few days, stayed in an orphanage in Portugal. And I bring these up because, I think what you said is so true that we somehow cut or eliminate some of the things that we do or some of the places that we go to in life that give us an opportunity to experience, give us an opportunity to confront, to really see what works and what doesn't work from a personal, not vicariously, not through hearing
Right.
about it or reading about it, but we actually get a firsthand experience. And I think what you're bringing up is how can we make some of the radical changes if we are not actually saying like, okay, what is the truth here? Or at
Right.
least in my experience, not in the opinion of my mother, grandmother, grandfather, my neighbor, my teacher, but in my own
And
experience. So
and
what are your thoughts on that when you think about this separation of the ugly truth and your experience?
I was gonna say, like, when you said like how are these changes gonna be made, I honestly wholeheartedly believe that the changes are gonna come from the bottom, from the grassroots level. So if we're talking about prisons, prisoners will be the ones like they have experienced this, they know, what happens in those places. For like communities like Vickery Meadow and just any community, I think policy and laws do play a role. We've known from history they can, criminalize an entire race of people, or they can create opportunity, or they cannot. So policy does play a role, but I genuinely believe, as long as people don't, kind of challenge themselves, their ideals, their beliefs, like every single person, every single family, and then every single community, like, and go out from there, nothing will change. Racism still exists, even though technically it was, I don't know what I saw on Twitter. It was like, racism doesn't exist because of the Civil Rights Act that was passed. And I'm like, I'm sorry to like inform you, but it's, it goes even beyond. I mean, it's the up is also racist, but the point is like people's hearts have to change, and they have to kind of come to a certain realization before, the worlds we're imagining can, become reality. So, yeah.
You were taught when you talked about when you were in Iran, and part of your faith in Baha'i is to focus on unity. And it wasn't until that moment where you had to identify the different races or colors and people that you were really present to, oh, people look different. When you think about what you studied now and what that race is a construct by humans for humans, but with real implications, like you said. What would you want people to know about race that you know? What do you know now about race that you didn't know? Let me ask it that way.
Um, well, I mean, like I told you, I kind of never questioned what even race is, and I kind of want people to sit down for a minute and try to define race. Is it how people look? Is it, the color of people's skin? Because, I am identified as white Caucasian. What does that even mean? Do I get the same privileges as other white people here? Or, because I'm an immigrant, because my hair is darker, I have, thick eyebrows. Like, what is race? Like, is it how we look? So I really encourage people to first understand that it's, it has not always been this way, and it doesn't, have to continue being this way. I'm not here like as a intellectual like who studied, race and racial discourse for years, but just from, some of the realizations I've had and, throughout my studies, is, yeah, just understand it doesn't have to define a person's. I mean, it does right now. It does define a lot of, what opportunities you have access to, what privileges you have and not, but it doesn't have to. And, at some point in American history, it didn't, like before, yeah.
It
So
was probably pre-American history,
pre-American
right?
for sure, yeah.
Definitely. I'm also curious about when you think now, you mentioned so much as people, individuals questioning themselves and their opinions about race or their experiences with some of these limitations, right? The systemic limitations that exist. What have you questioned about yourself, or what changes have you adopted as a result of what you've been exposed to or what you've learned?
I think, you know, just understanding what racial bias is and just trying to kind of realize that we all have them to a certain level because we're all conditioned by the society we grow up in. So even I have, some racial bias that I, had to catch myself on. And I can give you an example actually. One time some friend was talking about a CEO of a company. I don't know what conversation we were having, but she never mentioned the name. She never mentioned a race. So in my head, I was imagining a white man. And I still think like, why did I think like this person in power who has a lot of money was a white man? It turned out it was not a white man, it was a black man. And I was thinking like, what if it wasn't even a black man? What if it was a black woman? So I have bias against even my own sex. And yeah, just trying to kind of identify that. And it's really not, it doesn't mean that you are racist, you're a bad person. It just means that we all have some shortcomings or some lack of understanding, but really we're all conditioned by the environments we grew up in. And the sooner you are able to say, yeah, maybe, yeah, I'm not perfect, like I can work towards racial justice and try to identify my own biases and better myself. uh, but also for me it has been a lot of educating my family too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, well, for my parents, their experience in the US has been totally different. They didn't go to school to learn about American history. Much of what they know is, either Facebook videos that, were in Farsi about American
Oh
history
no.
or just,
Oh dear.
yeah, or just
Ooh,
me.
that is like hard knocks.
Or WhatsApp. WhatsApp, they be sending things all the time. um, but yeah, so I kind of had to, um, tell them as it is, and what I watch and what I learn. I kind of try to bring up in our conversations at home too. So I don't know if you can still hear me. I can't
I
hear.
hear you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so for example, I had to like, or I didn't teach my mom, but I, told her about the prison system when I was kind of researching that. I had to tell my dad about, how many prisoners exist in America, one-fourth of the entire world. And I guess like for our
One
parents,
fourth of the entire world is what is currently imprisoned in this country.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So a fourth of 7 billion people.
or yeah, seven,
Yikes.
no, 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 no. One-fourth of the entire prison population of the
Uh-huh.
world.
Oh, okay, of the a
Yeah,
fourth. Okay.
that is in the US. So it comes to a few million people in the US.
Hmm.
But yeah, I guess like for my parents, they kind of like to think America is, or they liked to think America is this perfect place. And I mean, my parents, worked really hard, and we bought a house, and their life is pretty decent. So to tell them like this country that has kind of given you opportunities, and you love it so much, is also this like mess, and this racist, this sexist mess. And there's a lot of work to be done. The laws don't mean that it's right. I had to tell my dad a lot of that because he's all about following rules, and you
Mm.
know if it's a law doesn't make it right. So I've had conversation with my parents. They're really open though. They're wonderful people, and um, thankfully I've never had to like teach them about how not to be racist, because they've also grown up Baha'is, and they understand unity and you know racial justice. So it's just been, yeah, just little things here and there, just understanding American history and how it's relevant to the way they see American society now. So um,
Good for you. Educate yourself and educate your family. Yes. As we wrap things up here, Ruha, what advice would you give? I think about the Eagle Scholars, right? The program that you grew up in basically since seventh grade, and the one that I mentor in. You have all these young people from all different walks of life, different countries, you know, different reasons for coming to this country or different conditions that they've experienced by living here. What advice would you give? Let's say seventh grader, eighth grader, right? Somebody that's just coming into this country, or someone that's experiencing this moment in time in history. What would you like to say to them?
Um, I would like to say that regardless of what happens, of what you achieve or what you don't achieve, like you deserve to be here, not because you're gonna be like this great person who makes a lot of money and contributes to America's tax dollars, or you deserve to be here because you are, regardless of what happens, you are a great person who deserves to occupy whatever space, wherever you are, you deserve to occupy that space. Even if you feel left out, you feel strange at times, you don't understand the culture, like that does not mean that you're somehow not good enough for the school you're going to, or you're somehow not good enough for the internships you might apply to. It's gonna be uncomfortable in a lot of places. You will join university, you will sit in classes, and they'll try to dissect the immigrant experience, and you're sitting there as an immigrant. You don't even feel comfortable sharing because there's all these white students who are, they think they know what it means to be an immigrant. But it's gonna be uncomfortable, just know that. But yes, you deserve to be here, and um, yeah, you're gonna do great. I know if they're watching this, I know they're gonna do great, but I don't think seventh graders and eighth graders are watching this. But um, and also work on your English, and don't worry about your accent because yeah, they can understand you. Even if they say they don't understand what you say, they can understand you. And if they don't, they can work hard enough to understand. And also, don't change your name, the way you say it, because that has value, as Valerie has already mentioned in the beginning. But yeah, don't Americanize your name. Don't, yeah, you're gonna appreciate this advice maybe when you're 25 or 30, but maybe now it feels uncomfortable to say Rooha Hagar. I'm not comfortable saying it, so.
I like saying Rooha Hagar. It's great. Rooha, thank you very much. I so appreciate this conversation, your willingness to really share deeply your experience, your lessons, your process. I love the radical questions that you posed, even to me, thinking about, wow, so what would this world really look like if no holds barred. I think that's really what I take from this conversation, and yeah, really, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for it, and I'm excited for what you have to bring. I can already see. I see some sparks there, Ruha. So I can't wait. I'm gonna keep up with you. When you go, and please let me know if there's anything that I can do to support you in any way. Whether it's a speech. You don't have to give me 20%. I'm good with
I
that.
still have to cut that check.
It's fine. You'll be doing great things in the world, so I'll just tag along and be there and go, "Yay, Ruha! I knew her when." So, no, really excited for you. Thank you so much for being on Time to Come Alive today.
Yeah.
Cool. Everyone else, thank you so much for listening in and tuning in to another episode of Time to Come Alive. Please make sure that you go to www.timetocomealive.com if you want this interview and others directly in your email box. Otherwise, if you want a notification from YouTube, go to Connect to Joy, the YouTube channel, and you will get notified there whenever a new video is posted. So excited to have you join us today. Stay tuned for the next episode. Ruha, once again, thank you. And everyone else, have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.